Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessie Calkins, and we will be embarking on Social Media 202 in just a couple of minutes when we have the opportunity for just a few more of our attendees to join us. Just a couple of housekeeping items to get us started. I'll be running the back end of this webinar today as well as giving this webinar. So I'll be asking you to submit your questions in the attendee panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and you'll find that you could type your questions in there. And if you have any questions, please contact GoToWebinar support directly, and you could reach them at 800-263-6317 if you happen to have any issues with connecting audio or any of the sharing items. If by any chance you weren't able to join us last week, we record our webinars and we share them on our YouTube channel, and I will be providing that link later in the presentation. So if you want to review from part one, because we covered a lot of content, and if you want to refresh from this one, then we'll be able to have those resources available to you. So we'll give this just another minute for a few more folks to join us. Don't want to miss out on any opportunities. And we're really happy to answer your questions today. All right, I'm going to get us started. So once again, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for Social Media 202. This is the second part of our two-part social media webinar series. My name is Jessie Calkins, and I am the Communications Officer at WAND, and we will be focusing more in depth today on the usage of Twitter and Facebook for building online communities, helping people take action on different issues, and really trying to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit of strategy of exactly how do we do this to get our point across. So just a little review from last time, just like TV shows say, what you missed on the last episode, just a review from last week. We have, last week we went over traditional media, what the scope of new media is, the power of the connectivity economy, which is, I believe, a term that Seth Godin coined. And we talked a little bit about the purple cow, which is the unique thing. And just to help get you in the mood for a webinar here, the story of the purple cow is that when you drive down the highway, if you just see regular cows, I mean, unless you're from a place where they have no cows, you're probably not going to stop and pull over and take a look at that cow. But if you saw a purple cow, you would do that. You would pull over, you would be thinking, oh my goodness, a purple cow. So that's the kind of content we want to create. So we're going to get on that today, and we're going to get on this whole entire narrative question of telling our own story with new media or social media. So we're going to come back. So once again, there's more than cat videos on the internet. And last week we talked about, who is our audience, what would we like to tell them, who do we want to reach, and who are we actually reaching. We're going to find out where you find that out today. We talked about correct content, that FTW is for the win, and we want to say what we want to say and how we say it matters on which media outlet we're on, as we would write for one paper or another, a magazine, a blog, same from one social network to the other. There's a very different culture between Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're going to talk about engagement today. We're going to talk about quality, and having even a small group of people who care a lot is much better than having a vast following of anonymous individuals who don't reply when we want to interact, when we want to share our message. We want to say things that matter and not just to fill the silence. We want to tweet things that are worth reading. We want to post things on Facebook that are worth reading. So not just cat videos. And ideally, and this is something that we should keep in the back of our minds as we go through all of this, because there's going to be some, technical aspects to this, some technique of what times are best to tweet, strategies behind hashtags. But in reality, all of this is one person or one organization interacting with another person or another organization. This is people talking in a different way. So we just as we would hope that our friends and our colleagues would just be waiting with bated breath to hear what we would have to say next, so too would we like our content to be anticipated, personal, and relevant. And so please keep these things in the back of your mind as we go over, techniques and strategies and data analytic collection options, so that we don't lose the intent behind this. So we're going to start with Facebook, and just like with all social media, this is a community. We want to think of ideas of how to engage with people. We can post content until we're blue in the face, as the saying goes, but we want to engage. So we want to deliver compelling content that engages with our audience. We want to give them that purple cow that can talk, as it were. So you can engage your community in a number of different ways. And during the question and answer at the end of last week's webinar, one of our attendees, Minnesota Senate President Sandra Pappas, had asked, how could a state legislator, for example, engage with their community? And we talked about asking a question. If you were a state legislator, you could ask your constituents about their opinions on different matters happening in your area, on what they think about this, that, or the other topic. Ask your followers for their thoughts on these matters. If you're talking about a controversial issue, right now we've seen a lot of things in the news about the budget deal, who's getting money and who's not getting money. Well, you can talk about the facts, and the reports that we sometimes produce are very important, but get the discussion moving. Bring up the information that is important, and we're going to show you some examples of this. And events are great. Maybe you're an activist and you're in charge of a local chapter, and you need to get the word out about that. Facebook is a really great way to connect with people, to let them know about events and event details, to provide up-to-the-minute RSVPs for people to share their photographs that they take at these events, so that as long as everyone's permission has been granted, you can share these photos after the fact from different people who attended your event, even if they weren't, say, the official organizers. So obviously you're hearing me say this, and you're looking at the next part of the slide, which is saying visual content, videos, photos, and link sharing. So if we're talking about the kind of content, that's one thing, and we're thinking about our intent of our content, personal, relevant, and anticipated. We want to be compelled by this content. Well, we're human. Not all of us can see, but for those of us who can, visual content is incredibly compelling content. If you look at the data from just user statistics within Facebook, you see that visual content is a lot more compelling than just bare text. So we're not saying don't share text in your status updates or what you post, but when you can, accompany those posts with visuals. So we see as much as 120% increase in sharing and commenting and any of the various ways, liking, that you can interact with a piece of posted content on Facebook when we have an image attached. So last week we talked a little bit about Instagram, which is also owned by Facebook. So it's very easy to pull your Instagram photos to your Facebook, and even if you're not a photographer, if you have a camera phone, Instagram opens a means of sharing those pictures from your phone with your friends, both within Instagram and Facebook. Vimeo is a related video posting service to YouTube. They're not owned by the same companies, but they function in the sense that they allow you to share videos and also to comment on them and have social connections with your social networks. And we didn't talk about Vimeo last week, but I had some people who mentioned it, so I did decide to bring it up this week. So if you have events, if you're an activist, if you are a state legislator, if you're a person who works for an organization and you go to events, if you travel, if you are speaking to a group, maybe you're doing a Hill briefing or something like that, or maybe you're lobbying a member of Congress. You take pictures and you can take video. Obviously, all these things require consent, and you can use this to help produce the visuals that accompany your content. Not all of us are fantastic graphic designers, so you don't have to sit and pore over Photoshop to make the perfect photo or the perfect campaign slogan. A lot of things you see that go viral on the internet. I'm going to go back up to these cat videos. There's just someone who slapped some text on a picture, and although those are pictures of cats and obviously not a strong social movement, you can see that those kinds of things get shared, one, because they're visual, and two, because people relate to them in some way. That's another thing to think about with your content. You know, what in this report that I have on, say, nuclear famine, can I pull out to make people relate to it? And then your community says, oh, I understand this. I need to share this with others because it will help them understand this situation. And maybe if you're at a loss, or maybe if you really want to get some fresh new takes on things, you can ask your community to submit photos. So if you'll see companies do this with photo contests for, you know, picture our product in this environment and you could win, you know, a new sample of this new product. In the land of activism and organizations that perhaps many of you are joining us from, you're going to say maybe not so much the product approach, but more in the lines of, you know, show us how you've, you know, challenged the status quo in your community by bringing attention to, you know, this piece of policy that maybe people don't know about, or maybe your community has a group of talented artists who want to submit that beautiful graphic that maybe you don't have the time or a designer on your staff to produce. So the more that we engage, the more content not only are we then being able to generate in response to that, but also our community helps us generate that content, and our reach expands beyond the people who have been our tried and true followers from day one. And we're going to go a little bit more into Twitter. So Facebook's been around a bit longer than Twitter, and some people are very adept Facebook users, and some are very adept Twitter users. Some people bridge into both networks. The culture of both networks is very, very different, and one of the things to remember about Twitter, especially perhaps if you are new to it, and is that Twitter is real time. It's a product of the moment. You know, as you log onto your Twitter screen, and we're going to be spending some more live time online like we did last week, you're going to see that people are tweeting everything from the newest headlines to, you know, their reactions to what they had for lunch. They're taking pictures where they are. They're sharing, you know, snippets of reports that their organizations are writing. So there's a lot in there. And one of the other powerful things about Twitter is it's a way to connect with individuals directly. A lot of people like Twitter because they can tweet to the director of the program that they're interested in if that person's on Twitter, and they don't have to go through, say, the organizational face. Although many organizations maintain their own Twitter feeds, frequently those are information depositories and they don't interact with people in the same way. But that's a choice to make, and we covered that a little bit last week, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in a little bit. And the other nice thing about Twitter in general is that it's to the point. You can write an entire essay in a Facebook post. I certainly would not recommend it, as probably not many people would read it, but it's an option. With Twitter, we must be very concise. We're limited to 140 characters, and when you stick a link in there, it drops it down to about 120. So what are some of the reasons we would use this concise, you know, real-time side of Twitter? Well, to lead followers to content. If, you know, my organization has just released a very long document on, say, the National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security, and perhaps for an everyday person who does not specialize in this area, it's pretty obscure, we can pull out quotes and we can share particular portions of our reports, of our content, of our blog posts, of the different things that our activist groups are working on. And it's a gateway. You know, maybe your website has many, many subpages, or you have an ongoing blog series of like the Peace Walk that Oregon WAND participates in year after year. And you want to let people know, oh, we've posted this new content. It's a way of jumping over things that perhaps you don't want to publicize at exactly this moment to get to the one place that you want to highlight. Think of it as like a highlighter for the internet, although perhaps that is not the best way to describe it. All right, a few ideas on technique before we go back onto the live internet, as it were. Customize. We need to think about building a voice. So if I am the president of a chapter of an organization that is an activist organization. Let's say I'm a member of WAND even, and I'm in a small town or in a middle-sized city, which is where I happen to live in a middle-sized city, and I really want to use social media to help other people learn about what we do. Well, how do I do that? In the sense of, okay, I can share facts and I can tell people about events, and those are great. But as I move from sharing facts to talking about events and other things, I have to keep in mind a voice. I think all of us at one point or another had to take a writing class or 2 or 3 or 10. Maybe you were an English major and you're an expert at writing. But the thing is that we need a voice. And this voice needs to be consistent depending on whichever network we're on. So if we're on Facebook and we've figured out how we want to relay ourselves there, we need to be consistent to that voice. Are we really witty and clever? Are we very just journalistically non-attached, sharing information? Do we use shortenings and emoticons, smileys, and abbreviations like on my previous slide of correct content FTW for the win? Or do we stay really within the specialized language of our community? Let's say we focus on Pentagon budget priorities. Maybe we specialize in this area, and that's really all we want to talk about, and we really want to customize our account to a community of people who only understand that very specific language usage. So you have to think about what kind of a voice do we have. So engagement, this is very important, no matter Twitter, Facebook, or any of the other social networks that we covered last week or that we haven't even covered at all, or the ones that are yet to come. Engagement, these are social networks. So just like it would be pretty bad manners to walk into a party and not talk to anyone, we want to talk to people. We can jump in on conversations on different topic matters. We can reply when someone asks a question, just as we said earlier in the Facebook slide, to ask your community a question. Sometimes individuals are asking for answers. Maybe they don't know the answer, and your organization or your group or you happen to know the answer. It's a good way to find new people out there with similar interests. Mention people. We'll get into mentions shortly, but when you're talking about your friends or your organizational partners or other groups that you work with, it's great to mention them. It gives them some exposure, and it has a little bit to do with what I've got down there called Share the Link Love, which I'll get to in just a moment. And if you want to mention other individuals, you can tagging them on Facebook or on Twitter is a great way to help them expand their reach outside of the people who already know them. And we want to build relationships. So we want to be present. So if we're running a Twitter account and someone tweets at us, we would hopefully want to tweet back to them, say within a 24-hour period. Especially if we're running the Twitter account for our organization or our chapter or something during the workday, then it's really up to the people in charge of that account to think, okay, do we have on hours and off hours? Do we reply to tweets between, say, 9 and 5 and only tweet between 9 and 5? There's a certain limitation you place on yourself when you do that for the different demographics that you can interact with, but it's a question to ask and something to consider as you build your approach. Sharing the link love, well, sometimes people out of the blue will be as so kind as to share your content without you asking them because it relates to something they're interested in, because they find it compelling. And so we share and share alike. It's not, I have the most tweets mentioning me, therefore I win, kind of an approach. we share and share alike because, as we mentioned last week, this is a connectivity economy in the sense of who you know, who you share with, who you converse with. That's the measure of your, I mean, there's a website called Clout, but it's a measure of how successful you can be in this community of different people who maybe you've never met on the internet. Yes, seems very ephemeral, but we're getting somewhere. We want to contribute to the conversation. So we're present, we are replying, we're mentioning people, we're jumping in and starting conversations, and we want to contribute to the larger conversation, and that's where building your own narrative comes in. Let's say you're part of a fellowship or a coalition of organizations that works on nuclear weapons policy. WANDA does that, amongst other things. So you would participate in partnership outreach when maybe one of the other organizations in your coalition produces a piece of report or has a briefing on something like this. You would share, say, their blog post about that. Or if people were having questions about this topic, because we all know that nuclear weapons policy isn't perhaps the easiest thing to access for those of us who do not specialize in it, we can help explain these items in ways that non-specialists can understand. Or maybe if we're someone who is a member of an activist group that works on bringing these issues to the fore in our communities, and maybe if we don't understand the dense policy, we can ask questions about it. Or if we do understand the dense policy, we can help make it accessible to the people where we are. So there's always a conversation to be had to continue to ask questions and to help more people understand. All right, analytics, analytics, analytics. So we've asked these questions about who we want to reach and who are we actually reaching. So we're going to take you to a couple of places where you can find some of these numbers, and I'm going to give you a couple of thoughts on what to think about when you're looking at these numbers, because it can get pretty easy to get lost in the numbers. I mean, every single day, most news outlets will tell us what the Dow Jones Industrial Average is and what our closing points were, how much it rose or fell. And day to day, that might put us in a great mood or a bad mood, or maybe you're not someone who really cares about economics. But the idea being that the day-to-day, you could get lost in those numbers. But you have to look at the larger picture to understand where you're coming from and where you're going and how you got there, because we're telling our own story. We're building our own narrative. So maybe I got 50 more followers today on Twitter. That's great, but where does that fall in the bigger picture? So we're going to pop out of PowerPoint here, and we are going to go back to the internet, as it were. And here we have my screen, and obviously you can see that it's been a little while since I popped in here to Twitter. And we're going to go over, for the next few minutes, some of the things that we see on Twitter. And actually, one of the most important things Right on Defense just demonstrated for us. So hopefully you can see this okay, but here's my little hand mouse here guide on this first tweet, which is for the account Right on Defense, which is from one of our, run by one of our friend organizations, Pentagon Budget Campaign. And you see this period here before @Patrick McHenry. Well, why would you do that? Well, if you're an adept Twitter user, then you already know. But if you're new to Twitter, this one little dot is a huge piece of technique. So you can see in this tweet that Right on Defense is tweeting @Patrick McHenry. And they're trying to get him to check out this particular piece by @NTU.RSI. And he gives a little snippet of the title and a link, and we have some hashtags here. So we're going to look at this one because it gives us a couple of different things. So you can see that Right on Defense is reaching out to this person to get them to look at this particular piece of information that perhaps they did not know about. What this little dot does is it means that everyone that follows Right on Defense can see this tweet in their feed. If that dot wasn't there and it just said @Patrick McHenry, that would mean that only Patrick McHenry would have gotten that tweet, or anyone who follows both Right on Defense and Patrick McHenry. So when you tweet, you want to think about, who do I want to see this? if you want everyone who follows you to be able to see something, then you would just start it with anything that is a regular word that isn't a specific symbol. You know, here we have my convo, you know, short for my conversation, libraries reinvent themselves. So those are tweets that anyone that follows these groups or individuals could see. But if we look at something that happened here, us with Wand lately, I think this was a pretty good example. I'm scrolling down to find it. So here, Molly Lindhorst tweeted at us, "Hey, at Women's Action, I would love to hear more about your Wand East-West Institute partnership. Where can I learn more?" And she tagged it with the hashtag Women's Rights. We'll talk a little bit about hashtags in a minute. So because she wrote, "Hey, at Women's Action," that means that everyone who follows her could see the tweet when I run this Twitter account. So when I wrote back to her, we'll go over here because it's not all on the same page. When I wrote back to her, which is this tweet right here, I'm going to bring it up to the top here. So we're looking at this main box here. So when I wrote back to her, I didn't put the period in the front. I just replied to her. So anyone who is following Molly Lindhorst and at Women's Action, which is us, could have seen this tweet, but not everybody. I could have made the choice to put the period in front, but in this particular instance, because I was just replying to her, I decided not to. I said, "We're happy to help," and you can start here, and that's me sharing a link to a blog entry that we had posted on this project that we've been working on for the past year. And then I tagged EWI Parliament, which is our partner organization. So this is what we call link love. This is what we call sharing the usernames and mentioning people on Twitter, because it looked like from her tweet that she didn't know what their Twitter account was. So by doing this, I, one, let EWI Parliament know that she was interested in information, and also let her know what the Twitter handle was. And this second link is a link to one of their pieces of blog production about this program. So this is link love in the sense that not only did I give her a piece of our content, I gave her a piece of our partner's content, and I tagged our partner on there so that they would know that she was curious and that she could also then have access without having to search too far for what their information on Twitter is. DM means direct message, which is a form of direct messaging on Twitter. You can get a lot of spam from this, especially if you have an individual account, but a DM is a great way to make sure that if, let's say, a journalist or an individual has very specific questions that you want to answer, direct messages are still limited to 140 characters, but if you just need to share a phone number or an email address, or to take a conversation offline in the sense that you don't want everyone reading it, this is a good way to do that if you want to keep it on Twitter, or you could share the information to take the conversation off of Twitter to online. You might also notice that I did not abridge these links. So you're probably pretty familiar with what they call link minifiers, like bit.ly, bit.ly, or Owly, or Google, there's which is goo.gl. Those are shortening services that will take a long URL, a website address, and shorten it down. And originally, when Twitter first started, it did not shorten the links automatically, and you had to shorten the link first. But now Twitter does that automatically, and there are a lot of reasons to still minify links, in the sense that some of them can provide you with analytics services to let you know who clicks on them. But the reason not to do that is that when someone is looking at the tweet, it will provide this summary of the article. So because this tweet has 2 links in it, Twitter gives a summary of the first link, which is the one from the Wand blog on our Tumblr site. And we can also see that our friends at EWI Parliament favorited this. And you can see that later on, they replied to Molly Lindhorst and us that they would also be happy to help, and they decided to provide their email address in the tweet, which is, of course, something you can choose to do or not do. So this is an example of a very short Twitter conversation where a community member wanted some information about a piece of work that we were doing, and we provided them with that. So I'm going to go a little bit more into hashtags before we look at just a couple more things. But don't worry, we'll have lots of time for questions. So here's another one from today. We have, today is the 2nd anniversary of the U.S. National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. We've got another link that I did not choose to minify. And if I hit expand, this time it's not giving me the summary because of the way that we're looking at this. But you'll see that this one would have a link summary. And then here you have hashtag, which is the $sign or the £sign. In terms of social media world, it's always hashtag. So these are 2 hashtags that demarcate a conversation or a topic. So hashtag USNAP, which is this first one, is used by different organizations that work on this National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. And then this hashtag WPS is a very frequent shortening of Women, Peace, and Security. If you want to know more about that, you can look at our Twitter page and you can click on this link and you can learn all about what this National Action Plan is. Let's see. Some of the other things that we've been participating in, you'll see a lot of women's rights on our Twitter stream. You'll also see earlier we had this post from our friends that were in a local publication, and you'll see that the Pentagon budget hashtags this Pentagon, which meant if we clicked on this, we're going to see whatever Twitter gives us for tweets that are coming up now or lately with the word Pentagon with the hashtag, meaning that it makes it searchable, like we talked about last week. So hashtag can denote a searchable word or phrase, but if you make a phrase, you can't put spaces in there. And if you put a symbol like an ampersand or a $sign, it breaks the hashtag. So here we have the options of top, all, or people you follow. So if we want to see the top tweets that mention the Pentagon, that's what this would give us, and it gives us some suggested organizations and people to follow. If we wanted to see all, it's just an unfiltered stream of anyone who's mentioned the Pentagon, and then people you follow would give us others that are people who we follow who are talking about this. So if we wanted to jump in on a conversation with some people who we already knew on Twitter, and we wanted to bring up a particular piece of information about, say, the Pentagon budget that's been happening lately, this would be a good way to find a conversation to join if we didn't want to try to start one ourselves. So hopefully that helps you get a little bit idea of how to use hashtags. Some people use hashtags more as a punctuation or a way of providing emphasis. And I find that more in the colloquial usage of Twitter between, say, myself and my friends. You'll see someone complain about something that's really quite frivolous, and then they'll slap a hashtag on it like first world problems. So like I said earlier, when you're building the voice of your organization or your activist group or yourself or the purpose behind your presence on social media, when you decide what kind of a voice you want to create, you have to think about, okay, am I the kind of person that, or the kind of organization that uses hashtags in a mildly ironic sense to make a side point, or am I really just going to use them to demarcate my tweets as a search item? So Congress, taxes, Pentagon, and then also last week we were talking about Twitter chats and Twitter town halls or tweet chats. They have a number of different names, and how you can have a ongoing conversation about these things with a particular hashtag. So back in September, when Syria was at the head of the news, a number of organizations that we participate with, including Win Without War, hosted a tweet chat, and they labeled it with this hashtag, Syria costs. So see, even if it's a phrase, the words need to all be squished together. And you can follow pretty much this entire conversation, even now, even though this was back in September, by searching this hashtag. And you'll find content provided on this about what the different opinions were on the different approaches to Syria. And some people will discuss where this information is coming from publications like the New York Times. You'll be able to come across individuals and organizations that are very knowledgeable about these topics. And especially if you're on an email list serve, sometimes groups will say ahead of time, you know, we're going to have this Twitter chat, or this one was called the Twitter Town Hall. They're interchangeable terms for the same thing at this time on this topic, so that if you have questions or you wanted to be present for that conversation, you could go ahead and do that. Another very common thing to do on Twitter is what they call live tweeting. So if you have a group of people at an event, or you are attending an event or hosting one, you could you know, give that event a hashtag, and you could tweet everything that's happening moment by moment about it, but you don't necessarily have to do that. So I wanted to just go a little bit more into what the hashtags were because of some of the questions we had last week. And I promised to talk about analytics, so I'm going to do that because I want to make sure that you all have time to ask your questions. So I'm going to jump over here. And so just about every Twitter account has access to this now. It used to be that you had to purchase advertising on Twitter to have access to this, but it's analytics.twitter.com, and you would type in, you know, you would have to, this is once you have a Twitter account that's up and running, you would type in your username and your password like you do when you log into Twitter online, and you can see a graph of how many followers you have over a period of time. If you're an organization that gets funding from grants and things like that, and you need to report numbers, this is a good way to have an idea of that. But more so, it comes back to that set of founding questions. Who do I want to reach? And am I reaching the people that I want to reach? So even though WAND is by our name, Women's Action for New Directions, you'll see that on Twitter, about 44% of the people who follow us are men, and about 56% are women. And some of the other places and people that people who follow us also follow, the President, the New York Times, NPR, Huffington Post, the White House, The Economist. You'll see location demographics. Most of our followers are the United States, largest area, Washington, D.C., and California, Massachusetts. Other would be other countries, and you can click in there to see one nation to another. Interests, what are these people interested in? What do they tweet about? Where are they? So these are really good places to look to see if those goals that you made at the beginning, you know, when you were deciding your voice, when you were deciding who is it that I want to reach and who am I reaching, this is a great place to find out who you are reaching, so that if you're not reaching the people you want to reach, you can make your decisions accordingly. So we're in Facebook now, and Facebook has Insights, which is what they call their own internal analytics service. And if you run a Facebook page, and this is a bit different than the regular Facebook user page that many of us have, this is a fan page. So we looked at this a little bit last week. So if you are running a page, you would go to the very top where you see admin panel. I don't know if you can see my cursor, so I'll highlight. And you will go across from here, and you see Insights. And then I opened this a little bit earlier to get it to where I wanted, but that would open into their analytics service. So there has been a number of different ways that Facebook has made this information available over the years, and it has changed its form, as I imagine it will continue to. And when Facebook started selling advertising, the format changed a little bit. So if you've been looking at the back end of a Facebook page for a while, you're going to see the graphs and the information available to you change over time. And if you have a budget to purchase ads, the performance of those ads is something that you also can see back here. So organic means that nobody paid anyone to share it. Not like organic produce, but that's what organic means on the internet. And paid is somebody paid someone to post this somewhere. Pretty straightforward. You can see over time the number of post reach, which I could do an entirely separate webinar on analytics and search engine optimization, but I won't take up too much of your time with that. But with a little bit of research and some studying, you can look at these graphs and you can see for you and your audience, for your community, what are the best times of day to post things on Facebook or Twitter? What are the people, what are the organizations? Who are the people who respond the most? What kind of content do people find compelling? When is it that I ask a question on Facebook or Twitter and people actually answer? When do they respond? And you can see for your own unique section of the internet, you know, who and what they're responding to. And that can be a very, very helpful and powerful set of pieces of information. In general, if you just even Google best time to tweet, you're going to see that around noon or first thing in the morning for news people or late at night. And you're going to see that when would I use Twitter? Okay, during my lunch break, I can check on Twitter. So if I tweet something around noon, then maybe more people will see it. You can see those kinds of recommendations online for different marketing companies will make these things public, and they will tell you, you know, for your time zone, what's the best time to do this. So for us, just to give you an example, and I'm going to use Twitter for this example because it's the live stream kind of real-time option, we'll see that if there's so many people who follow us in the US, and without, say, California, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the main large groups are in the East time zone, then I'm going to want to think about tweeting at times when maybe most of the people in this time zone will be seeing my material, and then maybe tweet some later in the day if I'm on the East Coast so that people in California aren't missing out. And then obviously if you're on the other side of the planet and you follow us, then it's a little less helpful. So we want our presence to be organic in the sense of people are sharing it without us having to pay them, but also if you have a lot of followers in China and they're on the other side of the planet, I mean, not so much with Facebook because it's blocked in China, perhaps that is a poor example. There are different services that allow you to schedule your tweeting and your Facebook posts. Things like TweetDeck and Hootsuite are different tools that you can set up your tweets ahead of time, and some of them have their pros and cons. Some of them you can tweet at an oddball time, like 13 minutes past the hour, so it doesn't seem quite so artificial. But in general, the more present you can be in person, the more genuine your interactions with others will be, because when we see auto posting, we can get a little bit turned off both on Facebook and on Twitter or on any of the other pieces of media. All right, one last thing, and then I'm going to ask for some more of your questions. Twitter for the masses. What is ThunderClap? This is a great service to let your message be shared with a number of people. Essentially what you do is you come up with a tweet and you would post it here in ThunderClap, and you would share the link to that message with a lot of people, and you set a goal. So if you had a tweet that you were hoping many, many people would participate in, so let's say I wanted this message about today being the 2nd anniversary of the U.S. National Action Plan. Maybe that was something I wanted a lot of people to see. I would go into ThunderClap, I would set up a tweet, and I would set a goal of, say, 300 people. And once 300 people had signed up to join ThunderClap by a particular date and time, then the message would go out on all of them at the same time. And I realized that I am not going to be able to talk about the merits of ThunderClap for a long enough period of time, and I probably will have to follow up with those of you who are more curious about it after the webinar, because it's time for questions. It is almost 3:45, so we will endeavor to ask your questions, and if you would like to ask them, once again, you can type them into the question panel, and we have some questions to start us off, so we're happy to begin. And so our first question is, how do you create an organizational Facebook account rather than a personal one? Also, is it possible to consolidate multiple Facebook accounts into one? So to answer that question, to create a fan page, which is what an organizational Facebook page would be, you have to start with a regular person's account. The manager of a Facebook fan page like this one always has to be a person, in the sense that there always has to be an individual's Facebook account that's associated with it. So what we have here at WAND, besides the individual members of our staff who are acting as administrators for this page, you can see sorry, I have some, here we go. You would see that we have two different approaches to this. So our WILL program, which is our Women Legislators Lobby for our women state legislators, this is a traditional Facebook account in the sense that it functions like an individual. So the WILL program has friends, like say I would on Facebook or you would on Facebook, and you have photos, and the things that are shared here are shared with friends. And this is the primary way that we administer the fan page. So first you would have to create a personal account, and then you would have to create a fan page that was administered by that personal account. And you can invite other people to share in administration responsibilities. You know, perhaps you have a dedicated person on the staff who can do that, or maybe you need to have multiple people who have that responsibility, and you would go from there. And then as far as merging multiple Facebook accounts, that in general is something that Facebook doesn't like very much. Facebook really prefers people to use their real names, and organizations to have definite people who are listed as those who are responsible for that account. So if there's spam or notifications that need to go to an admin, they would do that. Whether you decide to have a personal account and or also a fan page really depends on what you want to use it for, and that's another set of questions that we could go over about, you know, how do I help ask the right questions to make it so that I know that I'm building something that's going to be worthwhile for my organization. Another question that we have is, where does Twitter show up? I have to log in to see my feed, and it's not worth the hassle. Why doesn't it go to email or show up on the side of the screen? So you'll see that there's a lot of different ways to access Twitter. You can go to the actual Twitter website and sign in to see your feed, because it's your feed. Not everyone follows who you follow, so you could not sign into Twitter and go to an organization's Twitter page. Like this is, you know, we are just twitter.com/womensaction. And you could read all the tweets from one organization. And there's a certain amount of interaction with Twitter you can have without logging in, but Twitter began as a mobile service. It began to be interacted with on phones. Primarily, you don't have to have a smartphone to use Twitter, but that was where it began. That's why it has the 140 character limit. And so the idea was that it's very mobile friendly, and that you would pop in and check out Twitter to see what your friends are up to at this moment. And you can tell Twitter to email you when someone mentions you, or to email you highlights from the day if you want. But it's kind of like watching the stock feed scroll by. It's a minute by minute network. That's where it's placed its value. Each network is based on a different founding premise in the sense of this is what we're going to place value on, and this is what we're going to make our technology be strongly suited for. And for Twitter, it's really the moment-by-moment side of it, and showing up on the side of the screen in the sense of how some websites have their Twitter feed going up the side. That's something that you can have your tech people set up for you, or if you're an individual, you can, if you have your website hosted by someone, they can set that up for you, or it's not too hard to learn how to do it yourself if you manage your own website, I think, if I'm understanding that question correctly. And if not, please ask again, or a more specific question, and I'll do my best to answer that one. And we have another question. How do nonprofits build Twitter followers and Facebook friends without placing ads? So you're asking the right people. So some organizations and companies have a budget for this. And I think the state, this was published earlier this year, the State Department spent an awful lot of money acquiring its 300,000 likes on Facebook. And perhaps that money could have been spent in a different way. So these days, because Facebook has changed how it's set up to favor advertising, it's a lot more difficult than it used to be to create a group of people who are interacting with a fan page like this one. This is why having both the personal account or the form of the personal account like our Will program has, and a fan page like this is a very effective tool set. This is where the engagement comes in. Building a community of friends and followers really is an investment of time, especially if you can't place ads. And even if you had an endless budget to place ads, that doesn't always guarantee that you're going to get friends and followers. Some people, if they see a company or an organization placing ads, unfriend them or unfollow them immediately. And the fact that these networks began as free services that didn't have ads in the first place. So you see this juxtaposition between how these social networks were founded as free services to connect individuals and how they're functioning as companies, and how they have to meet their bottom lines by placing advertising. And we as organizations and individuals function in this space. So deciding to create content that is compelling, that is engaging other people is how we build followers and friends. And it takes patience, and it takes time, and it really starts, like if I was just beginning a Twitter account, and it was the very first time I had logged in, and I had no followers. What Twitter does is when you first log in, and unless I create an account, I can't show you this right on my screen right now, it suggests orgs and people to follow, and you can go through and you can start by following, The Economist and NPR and NASA if you want to. I think those were some of the first ones that I started out with. And then you go from there, and you can look on the side here when you're first beginning, and you can see that Twitter is going to try to show you who to follow. You can find friends because, like I said, Twitter began as a mobile platform. So it means that if you use Twitter on your smartphone, it can find your friends that are on there by their telephone numbers in your contacts in your phone. So less productively in the form of looking up organizations because generally they're not associated with a mobile phone number, but if they're associated with a particular person who administers the account with a mobile phone, then it would work. And I realize that this is a difficult thing to explain without being able to show you, but I think that the takeaway message for your question about how do nonprofits build these communities is by making the effort to create that content that is compelling, to follow people in your community of like-minded individuals and organizations,
And let's say you find a very successful Twitter account and you want to know who are the people who are the movers and shakers on social media in this group. Well, you would go into their followers and you could read, and many people provide these little explanations of what they do and who they are. And you could see that, oh, this person looks like someone who would do what we do, and this organization looks great. And you would start by following them. And you could start a Twitter conversation with them by tweeting at them, hey, National Priorities Project, we heard that there was a new budget deal this week, and we don't really understand how this is going to affect the taxpayers in our area. Do you have a recommendation for things that we can help people with to help them understand the effect on our community? So it comes back to, I moved to a new school, how do I make friends? I have to talk to people. So we have to reach out, and it's going to take what's going to seem like a long time, but as long as it's genuine and present and compelling, and we come back to those first founding questions of relevant and anticipated, then we start to build a following. We have another question: what are the different components of Facebook and how should they be used? Okay, Facebook again. So we have, for the fan page here, this at one point was called the wall, the Facebook wall. More recently, Facebook changed the name of this to the timeline because the way that the information has come to be presented has changed over time. If you've been on Facebook for a long time, you might have been a participant in this. And if you're new to Facebook, then this is probably the only way you've ever seen it, where things are arranged chronologically, more or less. And different parts of this would include different posts, and you could, if you had a budget, you could boost your post and you could decide which subsection of your audience to promote that to, and deciding who to promote something to would be a decision that you would make based on, okay, I have an event in Atlanta, Georgia that I want people in Atlanta to know about. So if you had a budget, you would say promote that post in Atlanta, Georgia, so that more people in that area would see it. If you don't have a budget for placing ads and you have the personal account, like we have for our Will program, the Will program has friends, so I could invite all my friends to that. Or if I had certain friends in a certain place, I could say, okay, I just want to invite my friends who are in Atlanta, Georgia. So here we're on, once again, what is formatted as a personal account. And once again, this was once called the wall, and many of us, myself included, who have been around Facebook for a long time don't always use the new lingo. The proper term for this is the Facebook timeline, and I apologize if I'm confusing anyone with using those terms interchangeably. Like with many changes of technology, sometimes we stick around and use the old word when perhaps the new word would be the more appropriate one. And let's see, different components, how should they be used? So this is a place where someone would go to find out what you've had to say lately. And here we've got a lot of different stories that have popped up, an advertisement for this last week's version of this webinar. One of our, Sandra Pappas, who's the Minnesota Senate President, she was on our exchange last week, she said, please go onto my account and say what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. Well, this is her page, and she's the Minnesota Senate President and the Vice President of our Will program. You can see that this field is blank. This is called a banner, and she could put a picture in there. You can see that she shared some links and some different pieces of media that she's found compelling. There's some pictures of an event. So you can see that people are interacting with these things and that they are sharing photos of her and as she goes about town and as she does different things. So how is this demonstrating effective use? In that people are interacting with this content, you're seeing that how should a Facebook timeline be used? Well, share photos, share links, share content, so that you can help people understand, if you're an organization, what your voice is and where you're coming from and things that you'd like to bring their attention to. And photos are great, especially if you are okay with tagging people in them, because people love to look at photos on Facebook and comment on them and like them and just share them with their friends if they didn't know that the best picture of them that's ever been taken happened at your event. All right, we are coming down to the wire here. We are just about 4 p.m. and I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation, and you will be getting a survey in your email, and we hope very much that you will fill that out. Obviously, 2 hours is not enough time to talk about all there is to know about social media, and as we evolve as individuals, organizations, and as our platforms evolve, obviously this is going to keep changing. So any feedback that you have, questions that you feel that were not answered, I am happy to answer them. I'm going to go back over here so that you can check out our contact information in case you have questions for me or for Wand. And if you want to find us on any of the social networks, you can see this is some of the places where we are on the web. And if you have more questions for Wand, you can find us here. Any email questions, you can send them to peace@wand.org. I'm happy to answer them. And if you'd like more content, webinar content of this variety, please let me know. If you would like some great examples from actual campaigns and individuals on the internet, I'm happy to share those with you. There's a lot of amazing people out there doing great work that we can all learn from, especially when we're first starting out. Thank you so much for your time, and a very, very happy holiday season and New Year to all of you. Thanks, everyone.